I'll be honest, I'm a looper junkie. I have been for over 20 years now. My first ever piece of music gear was an Akai Headrush E1 looper pedal, and I've been chasing that feeling ever since. From the Cocoquantus to the Cosmos, if it loops, I've probably tried it, bought it, kept it. So when my friend Scott from Cutlasses Instruments told me he was building a looper, I was immediately interested. I've known Scott for about 25 years now, and I was lucky enough to get my hands on Gloop, short for Glitchy Looper, well before the production run, to test it and offer feedback. It's been genuinely rewarding to see some of those suggestions make it into the final module. Now, Eurorack loopers exist on a spectrum. On the one end, you've got the press a button and sit back while the magic happens style. Beautiful, but you tend to be more passenger than pilot. On the other end, there are modules so deep you need a year just to read the manual. I'm looking at you, ER301. I love both approaches if I'm honest, but Gloop finds the sweet spot in the middle. It's both immediate and playable, but it's also got real depth when you want it. So let's give you a quick technical rundown. Gloop is built on the Daisy Seed platform, running 48 kHz, 24-bit audio with up to 2 minutes of loop time. You've got 4 CV inputs, a trigger input, and 2 audio outputs. The module draws 165 milliamps on the positive rail, 35 on the negative, pretty reasonable for what it does. But here's what makes Gloop different. 4 independent playheads, all reading from the same loop buffer simultaneously. Each can be at a different position, playing at a different speed in a different direction, with its own loop length. Add in the onboard effects, delay, reverb, bit crushing, tape emulation, wavefold, and extensive CV control, and you've got a genuine performance instrument. In this video, I'll walk you through everything Gloop can do, show you some modules that pair well with it, and then we'll get into some patches, ambient textures, rhythmic glitches, Frippertronics-style tape loops, and more. Let's get into it. At the heart of Gloop are these 4 playheads. Think of them as 4 independent tape heads reading different parts of your loop simultaneously. Playhead 1 could be playing at normal speed and could be playing the whole loop, versus Playhead 2 could be playing just a really small section of the loop somewhere near the end and could be playing it at double speed, for example. I press encoder 1 to cycle through the different playheads. The LED tells me whether 1, 2, 3, or 4 is active. And then whichever is active, I can use these encoders to control elements such as the speed, such as the start point, all of the rest. Excuse me. But all 4 of them are always playing. You control their individual volumes with these 4 pots. And now this is what makes Gloop so immediate for live performance. Now, recording is dead simple. Audio comes in here. To this audio input just here, and I've got the organelle with a little Platts patch coming into ears just to lift it to modular level. And to start recording, you simply press the red button. Gloop flashes white and black to show us it's recording. And press red again. And your loop is saved. Now I'm playing back loop 1 just here. The waveform appears on the screen and you'll see this line moving across. That's your player head position. Press the white button to stop play. Press the white button again to engage. When I stop the loop, you can see the playhead stops at the point and starts playing again from that point rather than from the beginning of the loop. So that's your basic recording function. Now let's manipulate this loop. I'm on playhead 1. So I'm going to start with encoder 2, which changes the size of the loop. Encoder 1 changes the start position, but I have to make the loop a little bit smaller before I can move the start position. See the little arrow markers? That tells you where you are. And you can go super small. If you press encoder 2, you can move the position, the length of the loop in a more fine way. Press it in again and it's more coarse. I can play the entire loop, or I can trim down to a tiny grain. Now, encoder 3 is Jitter. Let's get ourselves a smaller clip again. If I turn Jitter up, you can see the start point of the little arrow starts to move around. Jitter randomizes where the loop starts each time it cycles. At 0, it loops perfectly. Turned up, you get unpredictable glitchy variations, hence glitchy looper Gloop. Press encoder 3 in, you get reverse playback. It just sounds really nice. Okay, encoder 4. This is speed pitch. This changes the playback speed and the pitch together. Slow it down, speed it up. Pressing the encoder toggles between ratio mode and semitone mode. Semitone is calibrated for volt per octave tracking if you're using CV. More on that later. But we're going to stay in ratio mode now, and we're going to turn the ratio down to 0.5. So we're going to play at half speed. And now we're going to turn up to double speed. Those are our basic core playhead controls. Now I've got a clear loop, and what I'm going to do this time, let's take a different bass sound, is I'm going to do a multi-playhead texture to show you what the real joy of loop is as a multi-head playback device. And so let's start by recording ourselves a new loop. Let me just set everything back to 1.0. Jitter down to nothing, full loop engaged. Okay, record. Record some random white notes in. Okay, now we have a loop. Only playhead 1 is turned all the way up, so I can edit playhead 2 without fear of hearing anything funny because it's turned all the way down. I am going to turn up playhead 2 so it's playing at double speed. I'm going to reverse it. So let's hear what that sounds like. Pretty nice. Right, I'm gonna slightly pull the length of that down. Right, on to playhead 3, gonna go half speed. Let's make that go in normal direction, but let's make a smaller loop. Now with channel 4, I'm going to go at normal speed, but I'm going to create a little bit of a micro loop. going backwards with a lot of jitter. You can see how quickly you can build these complex layered textures from a really simple single source. You can have loads of fun playing over the top of these loops as well. So I'm just going to set the attack and decay of my Plats patch to very slow. Again, making just a great tool for live performance because you've got this ability to manipulate loops in real time. Okay, let's talk about overdubbing. Now, with the loop playing and with the right settings engaged, pressing record again and Gloop overdubs. It layers new audio onto what's already there. You can build up these dense, evolving loops this way. Add a bit of effects, just sounds great. Okay then. Now Gloop has a grid function to split up the audio into evenly spaced chunks. In the CV MISC menu, you can see grid there. You can enable a 4, 8 or 16 step grid. So you can see here I've got my loop chunked up. So when I select a size, it will snap to these 16ths. I don't do a lot of rhythmic beaty stuff, but I actually find this really useful for ambient stuff too. But if I did, this would be a total go-to feature, especially as you've got a gate in to start and stop recording. Right, so we're looping that section. Going to bring up playhead 2. Playhead 3. And 4. One of my favourite things to do, I'll show you this more later, but using PAMs with some sample and hold random LFOs to control the 4 different start points of the playheads. Just engage that. So there, we've got different LFOs here jumping the start of the playhead to different points. Really, really great feature, and this is one of my favorite ways to use Gloop. Remember, while this is running, we can just go ahead and overdub on the top as well. Complex looping. Let's have a quick listen to the onboard effects. I've got a patch loaded and I've got a multi-playhead loop going. So let's dive in. We've got our time-based effects, which important note are mono. We've got delay time, delay feedback, and then we can mix that in. Because these effects are mono, you can only apply them to either output A or B. A and B doesn't have to be a stereo out, that's how I'm using it. You could send 3 of your loops to A and 1 of them to B, or you could send dry to A and wet to B. Bunch of different stuff you could do with that. And then a mono reverb effect as well. Quite nice sounding for what it's worth. Let's turn those all the way down. I'm using some outboard reverb, as you can see. Effects page 2, we've got our bit crushing. So let's reduce the number of bits. You can hear the artifacts of bit crushing start to come in there. And then if you turn down further, you get that lovely crunch effect up to absolute disaster down at the bottom there. And then sample rate reduction that always goes with bit depth distortion. Some sweet spots along the way there. And then you've got a routing option there, whether it's pre or post, or how exactly the bit crushing is coming to effect. There's a little crossfade control here. That's actually to do with the loops themselves. If they crossfade slightly into one another, if you've got some clicky loops, that's just useful to have here as well. Then on effects 3, you have where you want your mono effects to go. So they can either go to A or to B or to none. We've got Degrade, which we'll talk about in a little bit. On the previous screen, you also had in A, in B. That affects how much of the incoming signal goes to routes to A and B. And then we've got our tape effects. So we've got a classic tape wobble. Lovely. Saturation, which gets very loud, I'll warn you. It's a really nice saturation effect though. Some hiss. And an age effect, which does dropouts. So if you kind of combine these, you get a little bit of a chase bis blooper or gen loss style effect. You add that to your bit crushing, you've got some fun glitchy looping effects. Finally, wavefolding. This can be, always remember you can get back to your start screen by pressing and holding the white menu button. Let's get back to wavefold. So we've got different modes, pre, post, and none. We've got different waveforms to wavefold, triangle and sine, and then we've just got the gain. We'll have more fun with this later. Finally, here's the outputs page. Here, you can see I've got these 4 playheads panned across the stereo spectrum in A and B, the outputs. Okay, those are the effects. The last menu item I'm going to look at today is the CV targets and the CV attenuation. And so I've got it on the the screen here, just cycle through with the white button to get to the modulation screen. And you can assign each of these inputs here, 1, 2, 3, and 4, to different parameters. You can see I've got pos 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I've got 4 outputs from PAMs here, modulating the start position of the loop for playheads 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I can have them moving at different speeds at different points. Really good fun. I can also go up to pos A, which would control them all. I can also modulate the size. We could also use a gate signal to start each loop. This expects a trigger pulse. When triggered, the selected head will snap to the beginning of the loop. Playback will then loop as normal. We've also got STO, which is one-shot triggering of the selected head. Loop will play once when triggered, then playback will stop. So you could have random gates coming out of these 4 at different times, triggering off the different playheads just once. Then we've got JMP. Every time the voltage of this CV changes, jump the selected playhead to the quantized position in the loop based on the positive voltage. Then pan, modulating the pan volume speed. You heard the speed change there briefly as I had it selected. Lots and lots of funs to be had with modulation. I really like the way Scott has implemented the STL, STO, and the jump protocols, because they're just different things than you can do with the Gloop itself. Meaning it's not just creative control of features that are already there. Modulation really opens up Gloop and allows you to do different things with it. More on modulation later. Okay. Last page, CV attenuation. Each dial corresponds to the attenuation of CV 1 to 4, attenuating from max, original input level, to min. CV is completely zeroed. Bear in mind, this attenuation is digital, and CV above plus or minus 5 volts will be clipped before it gets to the module. Really important point to bear in mind there. CV MISC page. We've got an offset control. Useful if you want to modulate something up and down but only have a positive modulation source. We've got a write control, set the write mode. This allows you to either overdub, replace, or nothing. And then the aforementioned grid mode. Cool. We've had our tour around Gloop and its features. Let's get in and have some fun making some patches. Super quick rundown of modules that work well with Gloop. For input, honestly, whatever you like. Gloop handles both complex and simple sources equally well. A single oscillator, full mix, field recordings, it's all fair game. If you're feeding in non-modular signals, guitar, voice, or contact mics, or outboard synths like I am in this video, you'll need something that raises the signal to modular level. I use Mutable Ears. I'm a real fan of this module. Obviously, Mutable Instruments is no more, but Music Thing Modular make a version of this module, and there are others available. It brings everything up to Eurorack level, and then it just goes straight into Gloop. Also useful here is you've got an envelope follower. You could use the envelope follower, for example, to trigger record. I haven't done this in this video, but that sounds like a fun patch for the future. Next up, modulation. PAM's Pro Workout is perfect here, or new workout indeed. Stepped random, Euclidean triggers. It's like PAMs and Gloop were made for each other. But I also love experimenting with stuff like the nonlinear circuits modules. So something like triple sloths for slow glacial movement. So when you kind of got the playheads drifting almost imperceptibly, or something like hyper chaos. If you want to go for complete insanity, just let it rip and see what happens. It's useful to have a clock source as well, or clock divider for engaging record via the gate input. I do less of that on this video, but if you're into, for example, things like chopping up breakbeats, you'd want a clock input both to start record and stop record, so that you could do some really, really interesting things with the grid mode. Gloop, equally good for chopping up breakbeats as it is for ambient loops, but you'll find more of the latter in this particular video. Finally, effects. Now look, Gloop has got onboard effects. The bit crusher is amazing. The wavefolder I use a great deal. And it's got time-based effects, delay and reverb, but at the moment they're only mono, so they only route to one of the A or B, and I like to use Gloop in stereo and put the 4 playheads across the stereo field. So I've got a stereo filter and a stereo kind of granular reverby effect here, but you could also use a delay such as IntelliGel C-legs. This gives the loops a little bit more space and dimension. But to be honest, that's it, and that's why I'm using a small case for this video. Preamp in, modulation patched, stereo effect out, simple setup, endless possibilities. Let's begin with one of my favourite Gloop setups. I've got grid mode enabled, 16 divisions here, and Pam's Pro Workout sending random stepped voltages to the position of all 4 playheads. You want to use something that gives you discrete voltage steps rather than smooth movement, such as Pam's or maybe a sample and hold module. What you'll get is these repeated micro phrases that lock to the grid, but with intermittent movement as the voltages shift. So it's rhythmic and coherent, but it's evolving as well. Each playhead is at a different speed, and when Pam's fires out a new voltage, they all jump to new positions. Or you can offset the trigger timing for something a bit more scattered as well. It's that balance of structure and unpredictability that makes this one I keep coming back to. Let's have a listen. Okay, let's talk one-shot triggering. So let's go to the CV inputs page again. STO is for the one shot. And so when I start Pam's, what I've got here is I've got loaded in the buffer, I've got a long clip with 4 little motifs, and I've put the playhead against each of the motifs. So channel 1, 2, 3, 4. And so each time Pam sends a gate to 1, 2, 3, and 4, it plays that little motif. So let's press start. You see each time you get one of these light up, it's playing the playheads. This one shot triggering is really good for kind of creative looping, where you want to have a long clip with lots of different stuff going on, and you want to fire off different points of the clip at different times. I found it's a really great creative tool. This one's got a clip from the Polygene, which you can just see at the bottom of the screen. Lovely, lovely synth. And then again, just a little bit of effects from ROM. There you go, one shot looping. This patch makes use of Gloop's Degrade function, which is perfect for Frippertronics-style evolving loops. I've got different synth sounds feeding in, and I'm just letting Gloop overdub continuously. With Degrade turned up, every time the loop cycles, the existing audio gets a little quieter and loses some high end. Old layers gradually fade into the background as new material comes in. But here's where it gets interesting. I've set the bit crusher into the Degrade path, so it's not crushing the whole signal, just the degradation process. As layers age and fade, they get progressively crunchier and more lo-fi. Fresh audio comes in clean and then slowly deteriorates, losing fidelity as it loses volume. It's like tape that has been dubbed 100 times. Gloop builds this constantly shifting, decaying texture. Nothing stays forever. It all eventually crumbles away as I play new synth sounds on top. Let's have a listen. Okay, let me talk you through this patch a little bit because I've gone a bit to town on it. Let's go to the CV targets page. So you can see I've got STO1 and then speed 1 on CV targets 1 and 2. And so basically what that's doing is every time a gate is received into CV input 1, the first loop plays as a one shot. And then there's a second control voltage, which is a quantized sample and hold from PAMS, which is controlling the speed or the pitch of the first channel. So if I just turn down channel 2 and just play here, every time you see a light come up on channel 1 of PAMS, we get a note. And because 5 is quantized as an output, it's within a particular scale. Now, I've also done the same with channels CV targets 3 and 4 into STO, so one shot channel 2 and speed channel 2. What you have to remember is, let me just go on to 1 and 2. As you can see, they're set to -12 semitones. If they're set to a numeric value as opposed to a musical value, this won't work. Volt per octave only works when you're set to the scale there. So let's press start on both of them. Wait for a note to start playing. Got a bit of granular reverb here from Rom. I think it sounds really nice. Got a little generative Duophonic synth patch thanks to Gloop. It's going to play a bit over the top. Okay, for this patch, we're going to try something different. Instead of a long gloop or loop, we've got a really, really short one there, less than a second, and we've got continuous recording enabled. We can tell that because the screen is flashing white and black. And what I've got here is I've got only playhead 1 turned up and turned slightly less than full. And I've also got the degrade function engaged at about 10 p.m. Now, what's going to happen when I play a note here is that Gloop is going to loop that little note and it's going to repeat it like a delay, just like a single delay line. And each time the delay repeats, it's going to slightly degrade the signal, quieten it, apply a little bit of a filter, giving you a very kind of traditional delay echo. Now you notice here as well that I've got the time set at 2x. Let me just bring that down to 1x so you can hear what it sounds as a standard repeat. Going to pull that back up to 2x because I quite like the octave delay here. Not using the onboard delay. This is using literally the playheads as a delay. I add a little bit of wobble to give it that premium echo feel. You can see importantly I've got right set to overdub. And so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to show you what I've done with effects 2 with the bit crushing. So I've got bit crushing turned up. Not all the way, but enough that it's a noticeable effect, and same with sample rate reduction. But you can see here, BCMO, it's set to the degrade path. What that means is every single repeat, every single time a Gloop overdubs upon itself, it's reapplying the bit crushing and the sample rate reduction. So every repeat is a little bit more crushed and a little bit more destroyed. I think this makes for a really nice, interesting, unusual patch. Kind of reminds me of Nautilus or one of those pedals. It's one of the things that makes Gloop so really interesting is there's so much control, and because it's got this great mix between being really immediate and having depth, you can get really stuck into it and produce patches that you just wouldn't have imagined from a normal looper. Fans of my channel will notice that I've got Jutvik Sistral here as well, engaged. It's one of my favourite of their filters. It's an MS-20 style bandpass filter with noise in the circuit, which is just giving it a little bit more crunch. Just turn up ROM. Now, the next thing you'll notice is that crossfade does something interesting when I turn it up. Kind of smears the effect a bit. If you've got a Gloop and have creative different uses for it, I'd love to hear from you. I want to use this patch to explain the small but vitally important difference between jump and position when it comes to CV inputs. Now, one of the things about Gloop that when I was first trying it out, I said to Scott was, I'd love to have different clips on different playheads, but it kind of goes against the grain of like what Gloop is really about, which is like taking a single loop and playing it differently across four playheads, kind of, you know, emulating a tape looper of old. And so obviously the way around that is to have, you know, you can record up to 2 minutes of audio on Gloop at high resolution, and so if you have a long clip with lots of different sections like I've got here, you can do interesting things with it where different playheads are playing different parts of the clip. I haven't got that here. What I've got here is a long clip with some different jump and position parameters. So let's have a look at what's happening here. Let's go to playhead 1. Playhead 1, we've got this random LFO from PAMS controlling the jump parameter of clip 1, and you can see the little arrows, the little chevrons don't move, so we've got the same clip is selected across this long recording, but every time there's a positive voltage, the playhead jumps within the clip. And so if I'm just going to make that shorter, and then longer so you can see what's happening. You can see the little white line move. So let's take it back to where we were. And if I speed that up, you get some kind of glitchy effects. You can have a lot of fun with that. It's going to bring it back down there. Let's slow it down a little bit. Kind of an interesting effect. Right, so that's jump. Now let's look at clip 3. Now here I'm editing position. So there you see the chevrons move, the little arrows. And so this is moving. We've got a fixed length of clip. You could also CV control the length of the clip. Got a fixed length of clip, but the window is moving with the LFO in this case. And because we've got some quiet over this end of the clip, sometimes you get nothing. There you go. And so this patch, it's kind of built around some jumping and some position. And then with some nice granular reverb after, just to give it a bit of smear. Let's have a listen without that. This is real glitchy looping in effect. So channel 3, you can see it's 2x, channel 4, 1x, and then channel 2 is kind of slow looping bassline because I'm playing it at -12 there. And then the second is just controlling a little bit of the pan effect there as well. Let's just play around with this patch for a bit. So that's Gloop, but honestly, the real proof is in how much I actually use the damn thing. Gloop has featured in 4 of my most watched YouTube videos. Apart from this video, it lives permanently in my 7U live rack. It's not rotating in and out, it's just always there. And last year I performed at the BBC Proms at the Royal Albert Hall, and Gloop was part of that setup. I just keep reaching for it. What I love is that I can patch in, hit record, and have something genuinely lovely happening within seconds. But then there's all this depth underneath when I want to explore the effects routing, the CV options, the grid quantization. It rewards both quick jams and deep sessions. Now, are there limitations? Sure. Part of me would love completely independent loops on each playhead, separate buffers, separate recordings. But that's not really the point of Gloop, and honestly, you can get creative with it. Record a longer evolving loop and set each playhead to a different section. You end up with something that feels like 4 distinct loops anyway. Sometimes constraints push you somewhere more interesting. I should also mention that Scott is actively developing Gloop. The firmware has been updated several times since launch, each time adding features and refinements. I expect more good things to come. So if you're looking for a looper that's immediate enough for live performance, but deep enough So if you're looking for a looper that's immediate enough for live performance, but deep enough to keep discovering new tricks, Gloop is highly recommended. There's a link to Cutlasses Instruments website in the description. Thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments if you've got one, or if you've got questions I didn't cover. And if you want to see more of Gloop in action, check out the videos I'm going to link at the end of the video here. Thanks for watching. See you next time.